Video 8 Episode 2, Get to Know Risk of Bias, Let's do it!
Dear people of tomorrow, in the previous episode, we learned about the basic of critical appraisal. But how do we actually apply those principles in our own research? The key is understanding that each study design requires a specific approach to evaluation. That's why selecting the appropriate assessment tool is essential. To begin with, let's focus on one of the most widely used frameworks, the Risk of Bias tool. What is ROB? Risk of Bias 2.0 is a structured framework to assess risk of bias in randomized trials, commonly used in systematic reviews. Focuses on bias form, study design, study conduct, and data analysis. When is ROB 2.0 used? ROB 2.0 is used to assess the methodologic quality of randomized control trials in a systematic review. It is used as a basis for sensitivity analysis before applying evidence into clinical practice and when developing clinical guidelines. ROB 2.0 is only for randomized trial. If assessed non-randomized or observational studies, we should use Robbins 1. Not ROB 2.0. ROB consists of 5 domains. First, risk of bias arising from the randomization process. Second, risk of bias due to deviations from intended interventions. Third, risk of bias due to missing outcome data. Fourth, risk of bias in measurements of the outcome. Fifth, risk of bias in selection of the report result. In Domain 1, risk of bias arising from the randomization process, 3 aspects are evaluated. 1.1 was the allocation sequence random. 1.2 was the allocation sequence concealed until participants were enrolled and assigned to interventions. 1.3 did baseline differences between intervention groups suggest a problem with the randomization process? To interpret our assessment, studies are categorized into 3 levels. Low risk, for proper randomization and concealment, no important imbalance. Some concerns, for incomplete information or unclear baseline imbalance. High risk, for inappropriate randomization or major imbalance related to randomization. In Domain 2, risk of bias due to deviations from intended interventions. 7 aspects are evaluated. 2.1, were participants aware of their assigned interventions during the trial? 2.2, were carriers and people delivering the interventions aware of participants' assigned intervention during the trial? 2.3, if yes, or probably yes, are not informed. To 2.1 or 2.2, were there deviations from the intended interventions that arose because of the trial context? 2.4, if yes, or probably yes. To 2.3, were these deviations likely to have affected the outcome? 2.5, if yes, or probably yes, are not informed. To 2.4, were these deviations from intended interventions balanced between groups? 2.6, was an appropriate analysis used to estimate the effect of assignment to interventions? 2.7, if no, or probably no, are not informed. To 2.6, was there potential for a substantial impact on the result of the failure to analyze participants in the group to which they were randomized? To interpret our assessment, studies are categorized into 3 levels. Low risk, adequate blinding, no major deviations, proper ITT analysis. Some concerns, incomplete blinding or unclear information. High risk, non-blinding for subjective outcomes, major protocol deviations, or inappropriate per protocol analysis. In Domain 3, risk of bias due to missing outcome data. 4 aspects are evaluated. 3.1, Were data for this outcome available for all or nearly all participants randomized? 3.2. If no, or probably no, or no informed to 3.1, is there evidence that the result was not biased by missing outcome data? 3.3. If no, or probably no, to 3.2, could missingness in the outcome depend on its true value? 3.4. If yes, or probably yes, or no informed to 3.3, it is likely that missingness in the outcome depends on its true value. To interpret our assessment, studies are categorized into 3 levels: low risk, for data almost complete or balanced missing data unrelated to outcome; some concerns, 5 to 20% missing data but handled appropriately; high risk, over than 20% missing data or imbalance related to the outcome. In Domain 4, risk of bias in measurements of the outcome, 5 aspects are evaluated. 4.1. Was the method of measuring the outcome inappropriate? 4.2. Could measurements, all ascertainment of the outcome have differed between intervention groups? 4.3. If no, or probably no, or no informed to 4.1 and 4.2, were outcome assessors aware of the intervention received by study participants? 4.4. If yes, or probably yes, or not informed to 4.3, could assessment of the outcome have been influenced by knowledge of intervention received? 4.5. If yes, or probably yes, or not informed to 4.4, it is likely that assessment of the outcome was influenced by knowledge or intervention received. For our evaluation, it is important to clarify the circumstances under which a study is judged to have a high risk of bias. A high risk is identified when no blinding for subjective outcomes, measurements tools are invalid, or measurements method differ between groups. In Domain 5, risk of bias in selection of the reported result, 3 aspects are evaluated. 5.1. Were the data that produced this result analyzed in accordance with a pre-specified analysis plan that was finalized before unblinded outcome data were available for analysis? 5.2. Is the numerical result being assessed likely to have been selected on the basis of the result form, multiple eligible outcome measurements, skills, definitions, time points within the outcome domain? 5.3. Is the numerical result being assessed likely to have been selected on the basis of the result form, multiple eligible analysis of the data? To interpret our assessment, studies are categorized into 3 levels: low risk, protocol available, and analysis follows plan; some concerns, no protocol but no clear selective reporting; high risk, clear evidence of selective reporting. In applying ROB 2.0, each signaling question is systematically addressed using standardized response. These responses include yes, probably no, and no information. Before assessing bias using risk of bias 2.0, we will first briefly review the study rosuvastatin and cardiovascular events in patients undergoing hemodialysis to understand its design, objectives, population, interventions, and outcomes. The overview: the study conducts a trial to prove the efficacy and benefit of using statins in patients who are undergoing hemodialysis. Primary results are evaluated through death from cardiovascular causes, non-fatal myocardial infarctions, or non-fatal stroke, and secondary endpoints included death from all causes and individual cardiac and vascular events. Please click the following link to open the current version of ROB2. This is the interface of the current ROB2 tool. You will see the text Excel tool to implement ROB2. Please click on that option. This is the display of the Excel tool to implement ROB2. Here, you will find the option ROB2 Assessment Board. please select this option. After that, the interface will appear as shown here. First, fill in the assessment ID using the last name of the first author, followed by the publication year. Next, in the column is the few teams aimed for this result assessed. Choose the option that matches the objective of the study review. Next, we have Domain 1, which is the randomization process. In this section, we assess three aspects within Domain 1. 1.1, was the allocation sequence random? The answer is yes. We can find the sentence of the article that states eligible patients were randomly assigned in block of 4 in a 1:1 ratio to receive either rosuvastatin 10 mg daily or matching placebo. The trial explicitly states that patients were randomly assigned in a fixed block size with equal allocation, which is an acceptable random sequence generation method under ROB2. 1.2, was the allocation sequence concealed until participants were enrolled and assigned to interventions? The answer is probably yes. Based on the sentence, Aurora was a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled, multi-center trial. The study is described as double-blind and placebo-controlled, implying concealment from investigators and participants. However, the exact mechanism of allocation concealment, for example, central randomization, sealed envelopes, is not explicitly described. So, this cannot be rated yes with full certainty. 1.3, did baseline differences between intervention groups suggest a problem with the randomization process? The answer is no. For the reason, we can find the sentence that states the two groups of patients were well matched with respect to baseline characteristics, age, sex, and race of ethnic group, and concomitant therapy, as well as mean duration of dialysis therapy at baseline. Baseline characteristics such as age, sex, cardiovascular history, lipid levels, dialysis duration, comorbidities are well balanced with no clinically meaningful differences, indicating successful randomization. Based on evaluation, fill in each column of the ROB2 assessment form for Domain 1 according to the selected answers. Then, complete the assessor judgment section based on the assessment. The assessor judgment for this domain is low risk of bias. Next, we move to Domain 2, deviations from intended interventions. In this domain, there are 7 aspects that need to be assessed. 2.1, were participants aware of their assigned interventions during the trial? The answer is no. Reasoning, Aurora was a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled, multi-center trial. The study was double-blind with a matching placebo. 2.2, were carers and people delivering the interventions aware of participants' assigned interventions during the trial? The answer is no. With the same sentence that is stated on the article, that we can say that double blinding means the study personnel are blinded as well. And for the questions, for number 2.3, 2.4, and 2.5 is not applicable because previous answer on 2.1 or 2.2 is not a yes or probably yes or no informed. 2.6 was an appropriate analysis used to estimate the effect of assignment to intervention. The answer is yes. In the primary intention to treat analysis, which included all patients who underwent a randomization. According to the guideline, with intention to treat ITT analysis and the modified intention to treat MIT analysis, excluding participants with missing outcome data should be considered appropriate. Therefore, this study in which primary analysis was intention to treat, including all randomized patients, is appropriate. 2.7. The answer is not applicable because previously, On 2.6, the answer is not a no, or probably no, or no informed. Fill in each column of the ROB2 assessment form according to the predetermined answers. Based on the responses in each column, the risk of bias judgment for this domain is low risk of bias. Next, we proceed to Domain 3, Missing Outcome Data. There are 4 aspects to be evaluated in this domain. 3.1, were data for this outcome available for all or nearly all participants randomized? The answer is yes. Based on the sentence, no patients were lost to follow up. There was no loss to follow up, therefore data for this outcome is available for all participants who were randomized. For questions number 3.2 and 3.3 are not applicable because previously on 3.1 the answer is not a no or probably no or no informed. And it also happened in 3.4 that the question for 3.4 is not applicable because previously in 3.3 the answer is not yes or probably yes or no informed. Complete each column based on the answer previously discussed. Based on the evaluation, the risk of bias judgment is low risk of bias. We then move to Domain 4, Measurements of the outcome, which includes 5 aspects to assess. 4.1, was the method of measuring the outcome inappropriate? The answer is no. And the reason is the primary outcome components are pre-specified. There are standard objective cardiovascular endpoints, which are death from cardiovascular causes, non-fatal myocardial infarctions, or non-fatal stroke. 4.2, could measurements or ascertainment of the outcome have differed between intervention group? The answer is no, and the reason is the trial explicitly state that all primary outcome events were adjudicated by a blinded committee. This is the strongest possible protection against differential outcome measurements. Both groups were on chronic dialysis, had similar follow-up schedules, were seen in the same centers, and underwent the same clinical monitoring. Therefore, there is no indication of extra cardiac testing in one group or more aggressive diagnostic workup in either arm. 4.3, if no, or probably no, are not informed to 4.1 and 4.2, were outcome assessors aware of the intervention received by study participants? The answer is no. Based on the sentence that in the article, all myocardial infarctions, strokes, and death were reviewed and adjudicated by clinical endpoint committee whose members were unaware of the randomized treatments assignments. From this quotation, we know that the clinical endpoint committee was blinded to treatment allocation. And for the questions, number 4.4 and 4.5 are not applicable because previously the answer for number 4.3 is not a yes or probably yes or no informed. Fill in each column for Domain 4 according to the selected answers. Then complete the assessor judgment section. Based on the assessment, the assessor judgment for this domain is low risk of bias. Next is Domain 5, selection of the reported result consisting of 3 aspects. 5.1, were the data that produced this result analyzed in accordance with a pre-specified analysis plan that was finalized before unblinded outcome data were available for analysis? The answer is yes, based on the sentence that the sponsor collected the trial data and analyzed them according to a predefined statistical analysis plan. The paper references a predefined statistical analysis plan, and the primary outcome is clearly defined and consistently reported. 5.2. Is the numerical result being assessed likely to have been selected on the basis of the result for multiple eligible outcomes measurements such as skills, definitions, time point within the outcome domain? The answer is no. The reason is because the outcome and its components are explicitly specified. 5.3 Is the numerical result being assessed likely to have been selected on the basis of the result for multiple eligible analysis of the data? And the answer is no, because primary conclusion rely on intention to treat analysis, subgroup and per-protocol analysis are secondary and transparently reported. And then we have to complete each column in the ROB2 assessment form according to the selected answers before. Based on the assessment, this domain is also judged as low risk of bias. At this stage, we determine the overall risk of bias, considering the assessments from domain 1 through 5. The overall assessor judgment is low risk of bias. After completing the assessment, click Save. A summary table will appear, shown in slides, including basic information, Domain 1 randomization process, Domain 2 deviations from intended interventions, Domain 3 missing outcome data, Domain 4 measurements of the outcome, Domain 5 selection of the reported result. This slide presents the final summary of the overall risk of bias. Click the provided link. Select the ROB dataset option at the bottom of the page. This is the interface of ROB dataset. Enter the study that has been assessed and complete domains 1 through 5 as well as the overall bias. According to previous evaluation, do not forget to click Save. Click the profile link to open ROB Viz tool. Click Upload your data. Under Specify the assessment tool used, select ROB 2.0, upload the previously saved ROB 2.0 dataset file. A summary table will appear for data review. Click Generate Plots. The Generate Plots display the visual summary of the risk of bias assessment for the reviewed study. Alright, that is all for the use of ROB 2.0 for randomized studies. Let's now move on to the next one.
When we dive into the world of systematic reviews, we often find ourselves looking at non-randomized studies. But how do we know if these studies are actually high quality? We use the Newcastle Ottawa Scale, or simply NOS. Think of it as a quality control tool designed specifically to assess the strength of non-randomized evidence, particularly cohort studies. Today, we're going to break down how to use it using its famous STAR system. NOS evaluates studies across 3 main domains. Let's walk through the question you need to ask for each one. First, selection. This domain checks whether the study picked the right people. There are 4 sub-items, and each can earn 1 star. The first one, representativeness of the exposed cohort. Is the exposed group truly representative of the average population? If yes, give it a star. Comparison group taken from the same community? Give it a star if it is yes. Attainment of exposure. How was the exposure measured? Secure record or structured interviews, and give it a star for reliable sources. And the fourth one, demonstration that outcome was not present at the start. Finally, did the researchers ensure that the outcome wasn't already present at the start? If they did, give them a star. Now, we are going to dive into a case study using this journal titled Cancer-Related Fatigue in Women with Breast Cancer, Outcomes of a 5-year prospective cohort study. In general, this study investigates the relationship between breast cancer patients and the outcome of cancer-related fatigue. The data were collected longitudinally, allowing the researchers to evaluate persistent fatigue following therapy over a certain period. First, the selection domain. For the representativeness of the exposed cohort, the study received 1 star because the population is fairly representative of general breast cancer patients. This is important as it enhances the external validity of the findings. Next, the selection of the non-exposed cohort also received 1 star. As the control group was drawn from the same community or population, this ensured that both groups are comparable at baseline. For ascertainment of exposure, the study used medical records and structured interviews. These were considered reliable methods that minimize recall bias and improve the data accuracy, thus earning 1 star. Lastly, outcome not present at the start was fulfilled. The fatigue outcome was assessed longitudinally, ensuring that it developed after the exposure rather than being present beforehand. And next, we move on to the domain comparability. Up to 2 stars are awarded here for how well the study controlled confounding. 1 star for controlling basic factors like age or sex. Another star if it adjusts for other important variables. And the first one, does the study control for basic factors like age or gender? That's 1 star. And does it go further and control for other specific variables? If so, add a 2nd star. Basically, the more they reduce bias through things like regression and or stratification, the better. For the case study, the study controlled for major confounders such as age, sex, and marital status, using multivariate regression analysis. It also accounted for additional factors including education, socioeconomic status, mood disturbance, and clinical variables. However, despite this comprehensive adjustment, it is still possible that not all biological or psychosocial confounders were fully controlled. Therefore, the study received 2 stars in this domain, indicating good but not perfect control of confounding. And the final domain is outcome. This domain asks how outcomes were measured and how complete follow-up was. The first one, assessment of the outcome. Was the outcome judged by the independent blind assessment, reliable records, or objective test? If it's not just self-reported, give it a star. The second one, was follow-up long enough? Was the follow-up period long enough for the result to actually happen? If it yes, give it a star. And the third one is adequacy of follow-up. Finally, did most participants finish the study? If the dropout rate is under 20% or well explained, that's your final star. In terms of assessment of outcome, this study used validated instruments such as FAIR along with medical and psychiatric evaluations. Although full blinding of assessor was not implemented, the methods are still robust enough to merit 1 star. Next, the follow-up duration was adequate, with a 5-year period allowing for observation of long-term outcome like chronic fatigue. However, for adequacy of follow-up, the study didn't receive a star because the loss to follow-up exceeded to 20%. This represents a key limitation, as it may introduce a retention bias and affect the validity of the results. So, you have handed out your stars. Now, what's the final verdict? We categorize the quality into 3 levels. The first one, good quality. You need the triple threat. At least 3 or 4 stars in selection, 1 or 2 in comparability, and 2 or 3 in outcome. And the second one is fair quality. This is for studies with 2 stars in selection plus the same requirements for comparability and outcome, which is 1 or 2 in comparability and 2 or 3 in outcome. And the last one is poor quality. If a study has only 0 or 1 star in selection, or 0 star in comparability, or 0 or 1 star in outcome, it falls into this category. In our case study, we can see that it demonstrates overall good quality, with strengths in population representativeness, exposure assessment, and confounder control. However, the main limitation is the high loss to follow-up, which should be carefully considered when interpreting the findings. Overall, the study remains valid and relevant, particularly for understanding the relationship between breast cancer and cancer-related fatigue in clinical context. Alright, this is all for the use of Newcastle Ottawa Scale. By using the NOW star system, you can confidently separate high-quality evidence from the rest. It's all about the details. Happy reviewing!
Okay, after we learn about ROB and Newcastle Ottawa Scale appraisal methods, now we will explore the essential tools for evaluating the quality of diagnostic studies to ensure your research findings are credible and transparent. The Quality Assessment of Diagnostic Accuracy Studies, or QUADAS, is an evidence-based checklist designed to appraise the methodological quality of primary diagnostic test accuracy studies within systematic reviews, while QUADAS 2 is the revised and widely recommended version of this tool, used specifically to assess both the risk of bias across 4 domains and applicability concern across the first 3 domains. So, when to use the QUADAS 2? You should use QUADAS 2 when your research requires a structured, domain-based judgment of a study credibility and its relevance to your specific review question. This tool is particularly valuable for ensuring transparent reporting and providing a foundation for a reproducible appraisal of the evidence base. So, there are 4 domains of assessment. QUADAS 2 organizes its evaluation into 4 key domains: patient selection, index test, reference standard, also flow and timing. To make informed judgment within these domains, the tool utilizes specific signaling questions that help identify potential source of bias. We come to the first domain, patient selection. The patient selection domain evaluates whether the way participants were recruited and included might introduce selection or spectrum bias. It flags problems such as non-consecutive sampling or inappropriate use of case control designs, which can exaggerate a test accuracy. This domain also considers applicability, checking if the included participant and setting truly match the population described in your review question. Key signaling questions include whether a random or consecutive sample was used and if inappropriate exclusion were avoided. Now, the second domain, index test. The index test domain focuses on whether the test being studied was conducted or interpreted in a way that introduced bias. Core issues included blinding, where the test is interpreted without knowledge of the reference standard, and whether any diagnostic threshold was pre-specified rather than chosen to optimize performance. For applicability, it assesses whether the test method and interpretation reflect how it will be used in a real-world clinical context. The third domain, reference standard. In the reference standard domain, the goal is to determine if the gold standard test used for comparison correctly classifies the target condition. It assesses if the standard represents an acceptable truth and if its interpretation was influenced by knowledge of index test result. Applicability concern arise here if the reference standard defines the target condition differently than your review definition. The fourth domain, flow and timing. The flow and timing domain evaluates the patient's entire pathway through the study to see if it might bias accuracy estimates. Key factors include the interval between index test and the reference standard, whether all patients receive the same reference standard, and if every enrolled patient was included in the final analysis to avoid attrition or verification bias. And now how we make QUADAS 2 judgment. To assess the risk of bias, QUADAS 2 uses three components for each domain: the extraction of key study information to support the judgment, the answering of signaling question, and the final domain rating of low, high, or unclear. Signaling questions are phrased so that a yes answer always indicates a low risk of bias. The practical rule for making decision is straightforward. A domain is rated low risk if as all signaling questions are answered yes. It is rated high risk if at least one question is answered no, suggesting a plausible bias mechanism. An unclear risk rating is reserved for instances where insufficient reporting in the paper prevents a confident judgment. Now let's assessing applicability. The assessment of applicability follows a similar structure where you document structuring information and judge the level of concern as low, high, or unclear. However, unlike risk of bias, this section typically do not use signaling question. The primary focus is simply whether the study characteristic match your specific review question. Now you can access the checklist and the guideline on the link provided. And here are the example of risk of bias table for QUADAS 2 assessment. Now, let's do a case study. As a practical example, consider a study, diagnostic accuracy of a large language model in rheumatology comparison of physician and ChatGPT. Moving into the first domain of our QUADAS 2 assessment, we look at the patient selection. Here, the first domain, our first signaling question asks if a consecutive or random sample of patient was enrolled. We mark this as unclear because the source material from graph did not explicitly explain the recruitment process. Similarly, for the follow-up question regarding patient enrollment, we also found it unclear. The study mentioned minor updates but failed to clarify if these updates impacted the exclusion criteria. On a positive note, we can confirm that a case control design was avoided, which helped reduce potential selection bias in the study. Move on to the second domain, index test. Next, we examine the second domain. In this study, the index test results were interpreted without knowledge of the resource of the reference standard, meeting the criteria for blinding. Additionally, For the second signaling question, we confirm that where a threshold was used, it was indeed pre-specified before the analysis began. Both of these factors indicate a low risk of bias regarding how the index test was conducted and interpreted. Move on to the third domain, reference standard. Similar to the index test, the research here were interpreted without knowledge of the reference standard research. Furthermore, if any threshold were applied to the reference standard, they were pre-specified. This consistency in blinding and pre-specification across both the index and the reference test strengthens the validity of the diagnostic comparison. Move on to the fourth domain, flow and timing, which look at the progress of patient through the study. We found the interval between the index test and the reference standard to be unclear. Specifically, the study did not explain the time elapsed between the administration of ChatGPT-4, which served as our index test, and the rheumatologist assessment, our reference standard. While it is confirmed that all patients received a reference standard and that they all received the same reference standard, there is another area of uncertainty. We have marked the question of whether our patients were included in the analysis as unclear because the study lacked a flow diagram to account for the total number of patients before and after the selection process. So, the overall result of our QUADAS 2 assessment show an overall rating of some concern or unclear risk of bias. Also, on the second domain and the third domain were rated as low risk, indicating acceptable methodological quality in this domain. However, the first domain and the fourth domain were judged as unclear, reflecting some concern regarding potential bias. Overall, while the study demonstrates generally adequate qualities in several aspects, uncertainties in specific domains may affect the confidence in the diagnostic accuracy findings. Now, to prepare for your visualization, you should create a spreadsheet with rows for each studies and columns for each ROB and applicability domain. Here is the example of QUADAS 2 table, and it is vital to maintain consistency in coding using a fixed set of allowed values like low, high, or unclear throughout the matrix to ensure the data can be processed correctly. Finally, once your spreadsheet is consistent, you can export it as a CSV and load it into the ROB visualization tool available via a web interface or R package. This allows you to produce publication quality figures, including traffic light plots for individual study judgment and summary bar plots that show the overall proportion of risk across your entire evidence base. Lastly, you can access the RobFish tool through this link. Having applied QUADAS 2, you are now better equipped to differentiate robust, high-quality evidence from studies with methodological limitation. Throughout evaluation of this detail are crucial for interpreting diagnostic research and improving the credibility of your review. Happy reviewing all! To watch the full series of our videos, you can access the link provided. Thank you for watching. Driven by passion, guided with compassion, Viva AMSA!